Okay, in this video, we're going to look at some more common question types for the IELTS reading test. Why is this important? Well, you need to become familiar with the test. You need to know what kinds of different questions you might get on the test. You also need to develop some strategies to answer these different questions. That's what I'm going to show you in this video. These are the different kinds of questions we're going to look in this video. We're going to match some sentence endings. We're going to do multiple choice questions. And we're also going to do some sentence summary or chart completion questions. Here is a different reading from the grade website. I'll give you a chance to skim this. Now, just to repeat, this is the kind of reading that you might get in section 3 of the general training IELTS test, or it could be any of the 3 sections on the academic test. Again, we can only see the title, read the title, try to guess what this reading is about, but then, for your skimming, read the first paragraph and then the first sentence of each other paragraph. That's usually the topic sentence. I'm going to give you a chance to do this. If you can't keep up with the speed, don't worry, you can always press pause. But what I'm also trying to teach you is to read faster. So reading speed is important for the test because you only have the 60-minute time limit. Anyway, take some time, see if you can skim this. Okay, so just to repeat, we need to read the first paragraph that provides an overview of what the rest of the reading is about. And then, as an example, I've highlighted the first sentence of the next paragraph. So in this case, this is the topic sentence. This tells us what the paragraph is about. You should read the first sentence of all remaining paragraphs. I'm going to go through the rest of the reading, and I'm going to give you a chance to skim more. We can see on this page that there is another heading. Now, this is going to be useful because it gives us another reference when we scan for information later when we answer the questions. But if you can continue skimming at this point, remember, read the first sentence of each paragraph. And on to the next page, if you can please continue skimming. And the final page, if you can skim more. Okay, if you weren't able to keep up, don't worry, you can always go back and check again. And I'm going to display these pages as we answer the questions together. So, here are the first questions. For this exercise, we have to match sentence endings. Always read the instructions carefully. I'll give you a chance to read these instructions. So, with any questions or with any set of questions, you need to work out what's going to be the fastest and easiest way for you to answer the questions. In this case, we can see we have 3 sentences with the beginnings, and we have 5 different sentence endings. It's going to be faster if we look at the sentence beginnings, and we have to decide, are we going to skim more or are we going to scan? In this case, we're going to scan. This means we have to work out what we're going to scan for. Now, in this case, I think it's going to be easiest if we scan for nature provides. Again, we might be looking for a synonym for nature provides, but we're going to try to find that keyword. And at this point, I'm not going to look at the different multiple choices of the sentence endings. All I'm going to do is try and find nature provides or synonyms or another way that this may be phrased in the reading. Now, when I go to the reading, I can see the first keyword, nature, in the 3rd paragraph. At this point, I read more. And it says, nature matters to people's well-being in many different ways. Now, the answer to what I'm looking for about what nature provides is not given in this sentence. So at this point, I need to read more. Now, this is key because in the IELTS, we want to minimize how much reading we do. We definitely don't have time to read everything, but in this case, we need to read more to get the answer. And we can see as we read on, it obviously provides us with basic needs such as food, clean air, and water. So I go back to the question paper and then I look at the sentence endings and I have my answer. I'm very confident that the best answer is nature provides people with food, clean air, and water. I move on to the next question and I'm just going to repeat this process of scanning again. In this case, I'm going to be looking for contributes or a synonym or maybe a different part of speech. When I scan, I find on this page, nature is a fundamental contributor to people's sense of self. Now, again, I haven't looked at all the sentence endings, but I think this is the answer. I go back to my question paper and I can see the first sentence ending A. This gives us the answer to this question. We've matched these two sentence beginnings, or we've matched the sentence beginning and the sentence ending. Nature also contributes to people's sense of self. And I repeat, for the third one, I'm going to be scanning for economic measures and something about accounting for or not accounting for. Now, I can see environmental losses don't show up in economic measures. But again, when I read that whole sentence, meanwhile, the environmental losses themselves don't show up in economic measures, this isn't enough information for me to complete the sentence. So at this point, I need to read more. As I read on, a country could get rich by cutting down all its primary forests, and many have, but the associated loss of habitat and wild species would not feature in national accounts. So at this point, I have enough to complete the sentence, and I can see that as sentence ending D. So that's the best way to match sentence endings. Again, we want to minimize how much we're reading, and we do that by scanning and finding keywords and only reading more when we have to. The next set of questions, they're going to be a sentence, summary, or chart completion. I'll give you a chance to read the instructions. Always read the instructions really carefully on the IELTS test. Please read these. Okay, this tells us we're going to be completing sentences. Really important, these instructions. Look carefully where it says, complete each of the following sentences with the following information from the reading passage. This means we have to use the exact words that are in the reading. How many words can we use? No more than 3. This means to complete a sentence, we could use 1, 2, or 3 words, but not 4. And the words must be the same as they are in the reading. How are we going to do this? Well, we're going to focus on scanning. We've already done our skimming. Hopefully this means we can find information quickly. We have some references. Let's do question 1. What we're also going to do is we're going to use grammar to help us make predictions. This sentence begins with there have been. This means in the blank, we expect to find a plural noun. There may be other words before the plural noun, but we know that there must be a plural noun because of the grammar there have been. What are we going to scan for? Well, perhaps UN or United Nations as it may be written might be easy to find in the reading. We're also going to look for something related to values that people attribute to nature. I do my scanning. I find on the first page UN. So that means I'm going to read this whole sentence. A major UN environmental meeting recently looked at launching an assessment into the different values that people attribute to nature. There's that key phrase. And what nature contributes to human societies. However, you may think that the answer is UN environmental meeting to fill in the blank, but remember that will not be grammatically correct. We need to have the correct grammar to complete the blank. So I read on. Now this is important. I only read on when I have to. In the IELTS reading test, we don't have time to read everything. We need to minimize our reading time, but in this case, we don't have the answer, so we need to read more. As I read on, I can find this term. However, these high-level discussions, right? So the meeting, these high-level discussions, there's that plural noun that we're looking for. We go back to the question paper, we fill in the blank. There have been high-level discussions at the UN to assess the different values that people attribute to nature and what nature contributes to society. I'm quite confident that is the answer. so I'm going to move on to the second one. Again, I'm going to use a grammar cue to help me with a prediction. We have the article an, so we know that one of the three words, if there are three words, will be a noun. We also know that the next sound is going to be a vowel sound after an. We're going to scan for standing on top of a mountain. We may have that exact phrase in the reading or something with a similar meaning. Now we can find here on this page, it is an integral part. Now, as soon as I see that, having scanned and found the expression standing on top of the mountain, but as soon as I see the article an followed by integral part, this is a really strong hint that this is the answer, but let's check. It is an integral part of what constitutes well-being, captured for some in the awe-inspiring moments when standing on top of a mountain. I go back, I check, I put that into the sentence. For some people, standing on top of a mountain is an integral part of their well-being. Again, I'm very confident that's the answer, so I move on to the next question. Again, we're going to use a grammar cue. We have in, which is a preposition, which we know will be followed by a noun. Again, there may be other words before the noun. What are we going to scan for? We're going to scan for major environmental disaster, and something related to due to the economic activity related to the cleanup and repair. So we can find the key expression major environmental disaster. Because of is the same meaning as due to, but when I start reading the sentence, measured GDP might actually increase as a consequence of a major environmental disaster. I automatically think that the answer is GDP, so I'm not going to read on. I go back and I fill in the blank with GDP, or I could also use the expression measured GDP. So on the test, there may be alternative answers, but let's check to see if this makes sense. A major environmental disaster might lead to an increase in measured GDP due to the economic activity related to the cleanup and repair. Now, if we go back, we can also see at the end of that sentence the key expressions because of the economic activity created by the cleanup and repair. So that is most definitely the answer. We move on to number 4. Again, we're going to use a grammar cue to help us make a prediction. What's missing in this sentence is the subject. So this means when I scan for the keywords destruction of the environment, it's quite likely that the answer I'm looking for will be before destruction of the environment or a similar term. So I scan for destruction of the environment, and I can see at the bottom of this page environmental destruction, so paraphrased with a different part of speech. Or it's just phrased the other way. So those who benefit from the current approaches are typically global elites, and there's that grammar cue telling us that the answer should be before environmental destruction. Benefit from, same meaning as profit. So global elites profit or benefit from the destruction of the environment. On to the final answer. Again, we're going to use some grammar. We have the article the, so that means we know there's going to be a noun in the blank. There may be other words before the noun, but now this is a longer sentence. Usually the longer sentences are harder to answer, and there are multiple words, multiple expressions in this sentence. So what are we going to scan for? Well, there are many different things we could scan for. We're going to start by scanning for converting nature into money. So we find on the final page, nature, which is referenced as it, is typically converted into money equivalents. So I've put this question down the bottom as an example of how you could flick back between the question paper and the reading, so we can match them up. It is typically converted into money equivalents, but we don't have enough information to complete the blank, so we read on. Which favors those who are able and willing to parcel out nature into small commoditized bundles, which can be sold to the highest bidder. We read on. This fails to take into account. So there is that next part of the sentence from the question paper. This fails to take into account. Same meaning as doesn't take into account. But we need to read more because we still haven't found anything related to joy. but we can see as we read on the keyword joy. This fails to take into account the views of those who believe that nature matters in other ways or on its own or in its own right, who care about the beauty of nature and the sheer joy that it provides to many. So the three words, beauty of nature, we have the noun nature. When we fill in the blank with those three words, we check that it makes sense. Converting nature into money equivalents doesn't take into account the beauty of nature and joy that it brings to many people. So there we have it, sentence completions using scanning. Let's move on to the last set of questions, a very common one on the test, multiple choice questions. How to do multiple choice questions? Well, we're going to rely on scanning again. What's important though is don't overwhelm yourself by reading all of the multiple choices. Just focus on the keyword from the beginning. So the status quo, that's the keyword from the question. Then what we're going to do is we're going to scan for status quo and we're going to check to see if it has the same meaning as choice A. So the status quo benefits the poor. Now we can find in the reading the key term status quo, and I can see something there about poor. I underline that for you. The status quo fails people, especially the poor. Now, that does not have the same meaning as benefits the poor, so we can eliminate that as a possible answer. Then we move on to the next choice. The status quo undervalues nature. Now, I can find a part here about undervaluing nature, so I read the sentence back. The current status quo fails people, especially the poor, and also threatens future prosperity by undervaluing nature. So, that is the correct answer. I'm not going to do C or D because I already have found the answer, so we definitely don't want to waste time. You do have that time limit. Once you find the correct answer, just move on to the next one. We're going to repeat the same process. Gross domestic product is what we're going to scan for. It may be written as GDP. And we're going to check choice A. Gross domestic product was used during World War II. Okay, we can find it on this page. Gross domestic product, or GDP, has been the most prominent approach since the end of World War II. Now, that does not have the same meaning. Because on the question paper it says GDP, or gross domestic product, was used during World War II. So we can eliminate that as an answer. We move on to B. Gross domestic product doesn't measure the monetary economy. Now you may make a prediction. Maybe you know from general knowledge that this isn't true, but let's just check as an example. So I can find something about the snapshot of the state of the economy. Gross domestic product has been the most prominent approach since the end of World War II, with GDP seen as a useful snapshot of the state of the economy. I need to read more to double check. What these figures often hide are things, like the role of nature, that are not measured in the monetary economy. So that seems to contradict what we have here. Let's check C, focuses on the role of nature. Now you may remember from what we just read that what these figures often hide, the figures in the GDP, are those things like the role of nature. So hides the role of nature. Again, that contradicts. So we're left with a process of elimination that the answer must be D. Now, if you want to check, we can go back, but D is the answer. So the last one, multiple choice question 3, we're going to do the same thing again. Here we're given a question. So, what is especially important for physical and mental well-being? The key phrase we're going to scan for is physical and mental well-being. We're going to check, is the answer being fortunate? So we're going to scan for 2 things here. When you have a question like this, it is a little bit more difficult because you're basically scanning for 2 things at once. So on the first page, we can find that phrase, physical and mental well-being. Then I can see the word fortunate. I read the whole sentence back. There is also a clear relationship with both physical and mental well-being, especially for those who are fortunate enough to have access to green spaces. Now, I go back and I check the answer. Being fortunate? No, that's not correct. Now, what pops out immediately to me is something I just read, which is option C, access to green spaces. So sometimes the answer may just pop out to you. If that's the case, and you can find the answer quickly like that, then just answer the question. So there we have it. We've done 3 different sets of questions. Just remember though, for shorter reading sections on the general training reading test, scan for answers immediately. You don't need to skim because it'll be easier for you to scan for the answers. On the other hand, if we have longer readings, like in section 3 of the general reading test or on any of the sections on the academic test, use the headings to locate information. For longer reading sections, you need to skim, read the first paragraph and then the topic sentence of each other paragraph. When you're scanning, look for synonyms or alternative phrases. So jump onto grade and see how well you can skim and scan. Practice until you are confident.